In our study of the text titled Sri Aurobindo Upanishad, we are looking at verse 8, which gave us three images of the sun to show the relationship between the origin of the world and the world itself. Before we came to verse 8, Sri Aurobindo's Sanskrit formulation led us through a series of large comprehensive perspectives of the universe as the Brahman, the one without a second, of which being and non-being are forms, time and eternity, finite and infinity, one, many, form and formless. All these are as if names cast out by his power of consciousness. And he is neither the holder nor the held, neither infinite nor finite, neither one nor many, neither formless nor formed, because he is the alone. We see here a relationship between that, the origin, and then this casting out of all these possibilities of the finite, of the infinite, of the one, many, etc. And all these are but names, that which is called oneness and that which is called multiplicity, that which is called the infinite and that which is called finite. All these names shine out indeed in the world whose very self is consciousness and which consists of consciousness alone. That was verse 6. And this relationship has been set between the one, the alone, as the originator, and the names which shine out, which are of consciousness, emerging from self of consciousness, and there is only pure consciousness. But now the relationship of the source, the self of consciousness, and the shining out of the names and forms, it is that which is elaborated in verse 8. The use of this word, names with a capital M, N, Nama, has been elaborated earlier in our discussion, but I thought it worth pointing out that in the spiritual tradition, the name given to a person or to an object, especially when it deals with the spiritual quality or power of that aspect of that person or object, that name is considered powerful in itself because it embodies what it represents. And this is the reason why normally when a person is initiated in the spiritual life, he is given a spiritual name. This represents the spiritual power that the soul in its journey is tending to realize, to manifest and fulfill, a potential which needs to be developed and perfected. And sometimes in certain traditions we find as a person progresses through different levels in the spiritual journey, the name is changed each time to represent now the new potential or the new realization attained so far. In certain esoteric traditions, they keep two names. There is the name which is known in the common life of the world by people generally, and then the spiritual name is kept secret and used only when in a spiritual context or in the protected spiritual space. The idea behind it is to preserve the potency of the name. And you see how all these forms and uses of names are a reflection of the deeper spiritual truth, in which everything cast out in the universe is a name, and a name of the same one. But the name is not merely a label, it is the very power and the very form of his self-expression. So this is an important observation to make. And we come now to the three symbolic representations which we have been dwelling upon the last two discussions. Three images are given of the relationship of the source of the cosmos and the manifestation in the world. As the reflection of the sun is one in calm water, but multiple in restless water. Real is the sun, real the reflection, the real light of the real sun. It is not a dream, but the light of a reality. This is the first image. And the second image, or as the light of the sun shines, filling the solar world with its force, as if running. Real is that light, the real luster of the real sun, that is not false shining, but a real luster of a reality. And then the third image, or as the flaming disk of the sun is not the sun itself, but this material form only manifests the sunness of the sun to our knowledge, which is dependent on the material being. The sun is beyond that form. Real is the sun, real the form in the shape of the disk. It is the real light of the real sun, not illusory, but the real light of a reality. So we already dwelt on these on many levels. The first we saw is a description of our sense experience, where we see the sunlight reflected on restless waters, fragmented, becoming the multiplicity. The second image is a reality of the mental conception, the mental world, where we visualize the sun filling the solar world with its force as if running. And the third image is of a reality which is above mind, transcending our mental conception. There is the pure sunness, and when the sunness glows out expressing itself, it appears as the form of this disk. But the disk is not the sunness. And yet, the sunness is real, the disk is real, and the light is real. Similarly, here the world Brahman is the true light of the divine, not a dream, nor illusory, nor a false shining. It is the real light of the reality. Not the divine in himself, but still he himself only. And so the analogy is completed here. The world as Brahman, and then the soul of Brahman, if we may use that word. Brahman in potential and then Brahman in manifestation. And the relationship is as the sunness of the sun and the disk of the sun, or the form of the sun and the light of the sun as if running, or the light of the sun reflected in the multiplicity of the restless waters. Three images successively. And in all these images, we are playing with two things. There is something in essence, and then there is something in movement, in manifestation, in multiplicity. The sun and its light. To fully appreciate this, it will be useful to look at Sri Aurobindo's description of this in his commentaries on the Veda, in The Secret of the Veda, there are several chapters describing the sun, Surya, and I will read from two brief portions which will give us an elaboration and an explanation for what is presented here. When he speaks of the sun as Surya Savitri, Savitri by the truth is the creator, but not in the sense of a fabrication or mechanical forming of things. The root of the word means an impulsion, a loosing forth or sending out. The sense also of the ordinary word for creation, srishti, and so a production. The action of the causal idea does not fabricate but brings out by tapas, by the pressure of consciousness on its own being. Brings out what? That which is concealed in it, latent in potentiality, and in truth already existent in the beyond. So the description is this, that there is already in the beyond our description, beyond our conception, in the self of Brahman, if we may use that term, in the essence unmanifest, all the potentiality is lying latent. And when the consciousness of Brahman dwells on itself, by an intensification of concentration, by a pressure of consciousness on consciousness, tapas in other words, it brings out and it releases in an impulsion a losing forth or a sending out. And it is that which becomes the experience of the world in radiance, in manifestation, and in multiplicity. So this is the deep truth at the highest levels. But then that truth reflects on all the other levels, because it's the only essential truth which therefore repeats itself in many ways. So in the next paragraph, he elaborates on this idea. Now the forces and processes of the physical world repeat, as in a symbol, the truths of the supra-physical action which produced it. So because the physical world is made by that same truth, it too repeats that truth, but now in a different way, in a different domain. And since it is by the same forces and the same processes, one in the physical worlds and the supra-physical, that our inner life and its development are governed, the rishis adopted the phenomena of physical nature as just symbols for those functionings of the inner life which it was their difficult task to indicate in the concrete language of a sacred poetry that must at the same time serve for the external worship of the gods as powers of the visible universe. So what he's saying here is, it is the same power in the supraphysical world, the same forces, the same processes in the supraphysical world as in the physical worlds. And therefore, if you had to describe supraphysical realities, you could use the symbols of the material world. And nature, physical nature and all her phenomena are therefore just symbols for describing supraphysical realities. And therefore in the Veda we see repeatedly images of nature, but by which they mean to describe realities of the supraphysical world, whose forces and processes are also presiding over the natural processes and phenomena. And so this language has a concreteness because it uses physical images, and yet at the same time it can serve for the external worship of the gods as powers of this visible universe. It links the supraphysical reality with the material reality, and by that linkage can awaken the material reality to the supraphysical experience, or manifest the supraphysical truths into the material domains. The language, the power of the verse, the sacred poetry, has this capacity to link the worlds. This being the background of how the physical symbols are used, Sri Aurobindo continues, the solar energy is the physical form of Surya, Lord of light and truth. It is through the truth that we arrive at immortality, final aim of the Vedic discipline. It is therefore under the images of the sun and its rays, of dawn and day and night, and the life of man between the poles of light and darkness, that the Aryan seers represent the progressive illumination of the human soul. I leave this, which is from the chapter titled Surya Savitri, Creator and Increaser in The Secret of the Veda. And I take another passage from an essay titled The Guardians of the Light. And here he says, Surya means the illumined or the luminous, as also the illumined thinker is called Suri. But the root means, besides, to create, or more literally, to loose, release, speed forth. For in the Indian idea, creation is a loosing forth of what is held back, a manifestation of what is hidden in the infinite existence. Luminous vision and luminous creation are the two functions of Surya. He is Surya the creator, and he is Surya revealing vision, the all-seer. Surya, of course, we commonly use this term only to describe the physical sun. But you see how it captures also in the symbol the two characteristics of the physical sun. He is the creator and the revealing vision, the all-seer. So not only there is the radiance of light and heat from the sun, but also within the sun there is the very material process of creating matter, creating substance out of what is essentially as if nothing. We briefly touched upon this last time, that in the sun the same process takes place which was described in this text. Consciousness pressing on consciousness to draw out and to create and then to lose forth. And observe how this supraphysical reality of the cosmic creation is actually replicated in the material process of the sun, where, as physics describes today, under the pressure of heat, under the conditions of heat and intense pressure, the sun acts like a pressure cooker to fuse subatomic particles, to form atoms and the different elements. Everything of the earth, including the rocks, the metals, the minerals, and everything that has evolved out of it in plants, animal and human substance, was originally prepared, created, formed within the heart of the sun, and then released, sent out, to become the substance and matter of the whole solar system. And even at this point, right now, out of the sun, there is an enormous wind that blows, which is called the solar wind, which carries material from the sun out through into the whole solar system, constantly raining down literally on all the planets and settling in as the new substance of the planets. So the sun plays this double function as creator as well as the revealing vision, and you see physically it continues this. You see also the root sound for Surya, meaning to create, to lose, to release, to speed forth. And it is precisely these ideas which we find in the three images of the text that we are reading. That the highest, the sunness manifested, appears to our physical knowledge as the material disk of the sun. And from that disk, there is the releasing of the rays of light, the sun shining out, filling the solar world with its force as if running. So it is the power of the sun that is released out in this movement of releasing, manifesting. And at the last step, that light reflecting in the restless waters creates this fragmented reality of appearance and the multiplicity. Literally, these three steps are seen in the way Brahman manifests himself. First, there is the essentiality, the pure, unmanifest existence, infinite in potential, holding itself back. And then when it turns to manifest, as the philosophical description goes, the Brahman is unknowable. We cannot know it, but he can know himself. And when he knows himself, the first step is taken for creation. He knows himself as sheer existence, which is consciousness and force of consciousness. And already from the pure sunness now, there is this appearance of form of sunness, which is Sat Chit, existence, consciousness. And consciousness is also force or power of consciousness. And then the next step, that force of consciousness dwelling on itself as Chit Tapas, consciousness concentrating on itself, the Lord seeing himself innumerably in infinite ways, concentrating on each of those infinite possibilities, draws out and loses forth, releases each of these as distinct experiences into manifestation. And there is the radiance of the Chit Shakti becoming, taking form, multiplying, becoming the universe and form of the universe, emerging out of that Sat and the Chit Shakti. And then, as that multiplicity spreads out, there is the last step where it separates itself completely until it seems to become fragmented reality. So the three stages are also articulated in the way we see the worlds. There is the Brahman, unknowable, transcendent. When he knows himself as Sat Chit, it forms the domain of Satchidananda. We have not yet touched upon Ananda, we will come to that shortly. And then that Satchidananda manifesting itself in multiplicity, losing its oneness, becomes the lower triple world of mind, life and matter, where everything is fragmented, broken up, the oneness lost. And you see the three images through which Sri Aurobindo has taken us are actually three steps by which we can recover the whole, the totality. The lowest level, the restless waters of our mind, perceiving, even when perceiving the higher truth, fragment it. The next step, arising, the lowest level of the mind through the senses, perceiving, fragments it. The next step, mind freeing itself from the senses, looking through as pure mind. It sees the light radiating from the sun, but it sees this duality, it sees the movement of light rushing out, but the sun itself not moving. The self of consciousness and then the expansion of consciousness in the world are seen as two, Purusha and its power, Prakriti. And that's how the mind sees in its pure vision. And then above that, in its essence, in the highest transcendent perception, We see sunness, which is formless, and the emergence of the form to our perception. But all through each of these is real, and this is the emphasis of the verse so far. We now come to this deep principle of the ananda, the delight, of which we have not so far elaborated, but the entire rest of the Upanishad dwells on the world as a manifestation of bliss. But he introduces this in the second half of the verse 8, where he says, similarly here the world Brahman is the true light of the divine, not a dream, nor illusory, nor a false shining. It is the real light of the reality, not the divine in himself, but still he himself only. So when the divine manifests himself, his manifestation is also himself, and therefore as real as he is. But it is not the divine in himself. The manifestation is as if something less, an aspect, a light, a power put out, but not he in himself. And yet it is only himself. It is not anything other than himself. And in all this emphasis, we are made to free ourselves from the idea that this world is false or unreal or somehow not divine. The insistence is that it is not a dream, not an illusion, not a false shining, but it is always the divine only. And then the verse ends with, this is the supreme Maya. This is the greatness of the yoga, of the mysterious Lord of yoga, Sri Krishna. This is his blissful Leela with his consciousness force. This is the inconceivable working of the Supreme. So we have a series of descriptions of what this is. 4 descriptions in fact. First, this is the Supreme Maya. Then it is the greatness of the yoga of the Lord of Yoga, Sri Krishna. This is the blissful Leela. And this is the inconceivable working of the Supreme. Now each of these 4 images describes the Lord and the purpose of manifestation in different ways, and the means of manifestation also in different ways. Starting with something, let's say, looking from below upwards. So the first description is, this is the Supreme Maya. Maya, as you are familiar, has the common meaning of illusion. So when you see a magic show, they will say, it is Maya Jal, it is the web of illusion. You are being deluded by the magical appearance of things, but the reality is something else. In the surviving form of the Shankarite teaching, the world is described as Maya in opposition to Brahman, which is truth, Satya. Brahma Satyam, Jagad Mithya. Brahman alone is true, the world is false. But we had discussed this briefly when we saw the mother's articulation of this truth. She says, the world is false or illusory in the way we see it. Our perception is false, but the world is not false. The world also is Brahman, as this text affirms. But our perception is illusory. And so we need to free ourselves from the wrong perception so that we may see the world for what it truly is, as divine and a manifestation of the divine, a field for the divine play. But here, the phrasing is different. This is the Supreme Maya. And here Sri Aurobindo uses Maya in the Vedic sense of the word, and not in the more recent, later understanding. And in the Vedic sense, Sri Aurobindo explains, Maya is not a power of illusion. It is the creative power of Brahman by which Brahman measures out himself into manifestation. The root sound for Maya is measuring out. Literally, to make finite, to give finite form to that which is infinite or transcends measurement. Just as a very accessible human experience, if we had to ask ourselves this question, can you measure your feelings? Can you measure your thoughts? Can you measure how much you love? And the very idea of trying to quantify and put into a limit and compare with limits seems so strange. It seems impossible. So it is that Brahman dwelling on himself, when he knows himself as infinite quality, infinite potential, to try to measure out, to give form, to limit into finiteness is impossible. Even the idea of it does not exist. It is ridiculous. And yet, the creative power of Brahman is so magical, so wonderful. He is able to somehow put all of himself in relation with himself and draw out an experience of measurement, of finiteness, of fixed appearances. And it is a magical power, but a creative power. His power. So Sri Aurobindo observes that the greatest power of Brahman, which is the truth and the Lord and the Supreme, cannot be a power of illusion and delusion. It has to be a power of creation and not of illusion. But the way that creation happens is so magical that we cannot understand it. How can you measure that which is unmeasurable? And how he does it, it's a very fascinating thing when you look at it from the best way that the intellect can access it. The whole world is as if spread out before us in appearance of finiteness, in measurement. You can say, this measures so much, that is larger, this is smaller, and so on. But if you observe carefully, our concept of measurement has no sense of anything absolute. It is always in relation to something else. When we have the fixed idea of 1 meter, how do you know it is 1 meter? You have to relate it to something else which is 1 meter, a measuring tape of the tailor. But how do you know that tape is 1 meter? You have to relate it to something else which you know as 1 meter. Or you will say, I relate it to something else which is 10 centimeters and 10 times that is your 1 meter. And if you go on in this way, eventually you find there is, to this day in Paris, in an air-conditioned, specially controlled, climate-controlled chamber, a metal rod which is defined as 1 meter. All of the physics experiments of the world have to relate to that rod to know what is 1 meter as a definition. But what is that measurement? It is arbitrary, entirely arbitrary. If somehow you approach that rod, or you made a replica of it which is smaller, and then took a photograph of the smaller rod and the bigger rod in the same proportion of the camera's angle, you would not be able to distinguish between the big and the small. The perception of this as a fixed meter is an arbitrary definition, and everything else exists in relation to an arbitrary definition. Remove that arbitrariness and the whole idea of measurement falls apart. Our mind constantly measures every single object in relation to other objects. And somehow in relation to everything else in the universe, we have this idea of size, big and small. If you remove that relation to everything else, everything lapses back into one infinite, unmeasurable, undefinable. The power of human mind precisely is this, to be able to catch this sense of limit and hold the sense of limit and keep the idea of limits persistent. But the moment you remove the sense mind, everything falls back and you don't know what limits are. I gave this example last time when a video camera, a photo camera, takes the picture of a world, it cannot distinguish between the horse and the grass that it eats or the tree under which it stands. For the camera, they are all points of light and nothing else. The distinction of a separate form, separate from other things, is the creation of the human mind. And this power to separate and hold the sense of separation is the Maya. The power to measure out finite out of indivisible, unmeasurable, infinite potential. So this is the supreme Maya. When he says this, he is describing the creative power of Brahman to draw out of himself an impossibility of experience of the multiplicity of the world. What an extraordinary power. So the first statement, this is the supreme Maya. But behind that, how does he do that? How does he draw out? What is this power of Maya? Where does it come from? And the next image takes us to it. This is the greatness of the yoga of the mysterious Lord of Yoga, Sri Krishna. The yoga here is precisely this power of tapas, of concentration of consciousness on consciousness, by which an aspect is drawn out and put out into the experience of the world. And the yoga of the Lord of Yoga is this power, it releases this power into manifestation of the power of Maya. But the Lord of Yoga is called Sri Krishna. In the traditional description of the different aspects of the divine, Sri Krishna is described as the highest personality of God. In a sense, everything in the universe is a personality of the divine, a name, as we saw before. But there are larger and larger, more and more comprehensive aspects and personalities. When all of the cosmos is drawn together and the highest personality of the Lord turning to manifestation is seen, that we call Sri Krishna by definition. But why Krishna? Popularly, Krishna means dark or black. And this is the way we know Krishna as the avatar, being of a darker color, dusky color, bluish, as sometimes described. But the blue actually is the light of Krishna, not so much the skin color. Krishna, in fact, the word comes from the root Krish, which is also the root for the Sanskrit word akarshana, attraction, the power to draw together. And Sri Krishna, as the Lord of the Yoga, is the highest personality of the Lord who reaches out to embrace the universe and draw it back into himself by his power of attraction. Therefore, he is called Sri Krishna. Now, you can see this symbol in many ways. The first way is he draws the whole universe to himself, holds it together, otherwise it would fall apart as if, because it is pushed out with an intensity which extinguishes all form into inconscience. And yet, because he holds it and draws it back to himself, the universe awakes from the inconscience, wakes to itself, grows to awareness of the Lord, and evolves into full awakening. On the other hand, he is in all things, and he is therefore secretly the power that draws together everything towards everything else. When in the chaos of inconscience, the cluster of subatomic particles fall together to become the stable atom and stay together, it is his power of attraction, akarshana, as Krishna, who draws everything together and creates form, and the whole universe emerges by that power. But how does he do all this? By his concentration on himself, the tapas of his yoga. So, this is the greatness of the yoga of the mysterious Lord of Yoga, Sri Krishna. So, this is the second image. The third image This is his blissful Leela with his consciousness force. At this point, the two are brought together. There is his power of consciousness and the force of consciousness by which the universe is loosed forth. And then there is himself, standing back from his power, even supporting his power. And the whole creation is the play of himself and his power of consciousness. So this is a step above when we spoke of the yoga of the Lord of Yoga as consciousness pressing on consciousness, as tapas. It is this Chit Shakti dwelling on itself, dwelling on the Lord and drawing out from him all possibilities. And we have now two. The Lord himself holding all possibilities latent and nothing is seen except he. And then his power of concentration, of consciousness, that draws out from him all those possibilities and releases them. And there is a play of bliss between them. So the factor of bliss is introduced here for the first time in this text. When we saw earlier, he knows himself as sheer existence, which is consciousness force. But the nature of that consciousness force is pure bliss. And the bliss is his play with his consciousness force. So in the way it is normally described, the Sat, the sheer existence, is himself. The Chit and the Chit Shakti of consciousness and consciousness force is his power, and bliss is the play between them. And this idea is captured here. This is his blissful Leela with his consciousness force. Leela is the play of manifestation, the play which leads to manifestation. The root of this Leela is very interesting. Sri Aurobindo actually describes in his writings on the origin of language the essential quality of each sound. The L sound, if you observe also, that's how the tongue functions in our mouth. L is a soft touch. L. Leela is L and L, touching twice. But first time with E and second time with A. And in the sounds and the power of sounds, A represents the absolute, E the relative. So Leela, the play between the relative and the absolute, and the contact between them. And you see the word captures perfectly this sense of play between the Lord and his power of consciousness, which draws out from the absolute and manifests into relativity of multiplicity. And the play is blissful. The nature of that play we find described in Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, where his consciousness force turns towards him to draw out from him all possibility into manifestation. He supports, he also sanctions. In a sense, by consenting, he has initiated. But he is never seen to be initiating. Why this distinction is made and why this distinction is important, the deeper sense of it is captured in the way this thing is articulated in Kashmir Shaivism. We have discussed this briefly in our study of the Isha Upanishad, but the Kashmir Shaivism describes it like this. When the Lord chose to manifest, he drew out from himself all his possibilities, and as he stepped forward to manifest, he paused. If he were to manifest, he would lose himself into the manifestation. So he paused and then released his energy to manifest so that he may remain always in his purity. And the energy moves to take his possibility into manifestation. So there's a very interesting, a very deep, profound truth here. The Lord can go back into his state of rest, and the entire universe is drawn into himself and extinguished. There is no manifestation. And there is a need within him to choose to manifest, otherwise there cannot be manifestation. So there is a poise that the Lord takes when he turns to manifest his infinite potential. But having taken that poise, he does not proceed by himself, because then he would be lost. He releases his power of manifestation, who proceeds to manifest. And that's the rays, the light of the sun running, as if running. But there is no real running, because his consciousness force never moves into anything. It simply moves in relation to itself. Nothing ever moves. All movement is only a phenomenal appearance of consciousness on the surface of his completely still foundation. And yet, she moves. And there is the power which casts out. But there is the poise before, where the Lord turns to manifest, and that is the poise which supports the whole manifestation, sanctions it, and even in a sense chooses what is released into the manifestation. But it does not release, she releases and gives form. So this is the third vision. This is his blissful Leela with his consciousness force. And finally the fourth, where we merge into the indescribable. This is the inconceivable working of the Supreme. Both the sense of he separate and she as his power of manifestation are merged into one indescribable supreme reality, whose miraculous working, inconceivable by mind, causes this manifestation. This is the inconceivable working of the Supreme. In the Veda, the word used is Adbhuta, the wonderful. And on all four of these levels, we can experience the sense of the all wonderful. This is the supreme Maya, the measuring out. And it is a miraculous measuring out, where nothing could exist if everything else didn't exist. And somehow, by the combination of all things, this appearance of finitenesses and infinite relations of finitenesses is revealed to us miraculously, magically. Oh, the wonderful. We rise above. This is the greatness of the yoga, of the mysterious Lord of yoga, Sri Krishna. And this is the aspect of the divine presiding over, holding everything, drawing everything to himself, releasing everything out of himself. And oh, the wonderful. This is his blissful Leela with his consciousness force. And we see the whole world as a manifestation of his bliss. Everything in the universe is an aspect, a color, a ripple of his infinite blissful potential thrown out into manifestation. Oh, the wonderful. And this is the inconceivable working of the Supreme. And we are held back wordlessly, gazing at the wonderful, the Lord himself. The next verse, 9, affirming again the reality, but placing the reality in contrast to the appearance which may not be real, which may be deceptive, which may be phenomenal. All this that is in the universe that we see, all this is phenomenally true, but false in reality. This is for the satisfaction of the mind. It is the mind which has the satisfaction of seeing things as they appear to be. For the comprehensive knowledge, that is the deeper perception transcending mind, for the comprehensive knowledge, it must be said that there is nothing unreal in the real Brahman. So we see an unreal appearance, but even that is not unreal in the reality of Brahman. Even that is one way the Brahman sees himself, as an appearance, as a phenomenon. So in a sense, when the human practitioner, the seeker of reality, the yogi, rises in his perception and begins to perceive the world as reality, as divine reality, it is Brahman himself within us who rises to perceive the world as divine reality. And finally, verse 10, whatever thus manifests is the world bliss only. So the true character of this manifestation is the bliss of the Lord taking form for his play. You will remember Mother describes how when she first came to Sri Aurobindo, she was present when Paul Richard had many philosophical discussions and arguments with Sri Aurobindo. And Paul Richard took the position that the world is manifested because of the will of the divine. Sri Aurobindo's position is also paralleling the Vedic position that the world was manifested by the bliss of the Lord. And therefore everything in the world is sustained by his delight, not merely by the drive of a mechanical, universal or individual will, but it is a delight as an ocean of delight playing, taking on innumerable forms, unfolding itself innumerably. And it is this which is the theme of the rest of the Upanishad from verse 11 to 19, which we will take up next time. This last verse 10 which we have read in Sanskrit goes like this: Evam yat prakashate jagad anand eva tat. Literally translated, Evam, in this way, yat, whatever, prakashate, glows out as light into manifestation. He is still following the same description of the sun and the light of the sun taking form. Evam yat prakashate, in this way, whatever illumines into manifestation, jagad ananda, the world bliss, jagat, the movement of the world, ananda is bliss, eva, only, tat is that, is only the world bliss. So in this way, whatever glows out and radiates into manifestation is only the world bliss. There is nothing other than the bliss of the world, the bliss of Brahman, the bliss of manifestation. So we can read the last portion of verse 8 up to verse 10 and meditate on this, and we'll continue this text next Sunday. Similarly here, the world Brahman is the true light of the divine, not a dream, nor illusory, nor a false shining. It is the real light of the reality. Not the divine in himself, but still he himself only. This is the supreme Maya. This is the greatness of the yoga of the mysterious Lord of Yoga, Sri Krishna. This is his blissful Leela with his consciousness force. This is the inconceivable working of the Supreme. All these are descriptions of the world Brahman. All this is phenomenally true but false in reality. This is for the satisfaction of the mind. For the comprehensive knowledge, it must be said, there is nothing unreal in the real Brahman. Whatever thus manifests is the world bliss only. Evam yat prakashati jagadananda eva tat. Whatever thus manifests is the world bliss only.